stream. Let's make sure that everything is turned on. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a bit since we've had our last Tuesday talk, so I'm glad to be hosting once more. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gloria. Sorry. My name is Gloria. I am one of the co-founders of Initial View, host of Tuesday Talks. Great to see you all. And today we're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of you are, if you're a junior, starting to think about as you prepare for your summer, writing for your college application. And there's been a lot of talk about shifts and changes in this world, but at the same time, higher ed sometimes moves very slowly. And I had to write an essay too when I was applying for college a long time ago. So some things are similar, some things are different, but we're going to talk about all of that today. But before we dive into the topic, I just want to make sure that everybody is remembering that at Tuesday Talks, we like to have a dialogue. We like to kind of hear from you and have you participate. So make sure that your Q&A box is open so that you're ready to ask questions at any time. And then we also will have a couple of chat things happening. So I'm going to make sure that you all can actually chat to us. Let's see. Yep, great. You are going to be able to type in the chat. And so yeah, we would love for you to ask questions right away, because while we have some thoughts about what we're going to talk about during the session, when you ask us questions, we can kind of fold it into our conversation, and that way everybody's questions are going to be able to be answered. At the very end, we will also have time for Q&A, but I hate it when it's the last 3 minutes and then I get a slew of questions that come in. So if you already have questions in your mind about like, what am I supposed to write about? How do I even start this process? Go ahead and start throwing that in to the Q&A so that we know what to expect. So, okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves. They are friends, and I've gotten to know them a little bit over the years, and I'm really, when I was thinking about this topic, I was like, I know who to reach out to. So I'm very glad that they agreed to join me. And so if, as we always do, y'all could share your name and where you are and maybe one fun fact about yourself. That would be awesome. So Sarah, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Gloria, for this wonderful opportunity. Very excited to talk on this topic. My name is Sarah Paulson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Senior Associate Director for International Admissions at Macalester College. And a fun fact about me is I am a huge Irish music fan. And that also includes Scottish. So I'm at the perfect school because I actually enjoy Highland bagpipes.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Crosby. I'm the Director of International Admission at Ohio Wesleyan University in Ohio, as the name would state. And I forgot to think of my fun fact. So maybe I'll just mention that I didn't learn to downhill ski until I was in my 40s. So you can learn anything at any age, pretty much.
Awesome. I'm impressed. All right, Nicole.
All right, good morning, good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Bensley. I'm the Director of International Admission at the University of San Francisco, and I use she, her pronouns as well. And a fun fact about me is I actually grew up in the middle of the United States-ish near Lake Michigan. So I am, I think there's like desert people and there's hot weather people, and then there's water people. I'm solidly in the water person category. So like being by the water is essential for me. It just like draws me in. Conversely, I'm not a desert person. I think there's a lot of beauty to the desert. I just don't understand the connection for some people. So I think that's a fun fact about me.
Awesome. And my fun fact I didn't share earlier, and I have, for those of you who have tuned into Tuesday Talks a lot, you're like, wow, I've learned a lot about Gloria. So I'm like, what fun fact should I share today that you all don't know? I don't think I've shared this one. I'm a big sister. I have a little sister who's 5 years younger than me, and I think that's actually shaped a lot of my personality and character. Yeah, and I love her lots, and she lives in New York City. And if you're ever in New York, if you end up in New York for a summer program or you end up there for college, she has a really awesome coffee shop, so you should go there. It's called Bird and Branch. Um, awesome. And I have this wonderful sun coming out into my window, so I apologize if it's blinding you. Well, I hope that when we always do this fun fact thing, because I want you all to kind of understand that the application process is about getting to know you, right? And those facts can be not just what your scores are and not just not just the actual activities that you do each day, but there are other things about you that are really super interesting, and that's kind of what this conversation is going to be a little bit about. I am going to ask you all uh, who you are. So if you have a minute and see this poll, I love to know kind of who is in the audience. And I don't know if you can see it. Can you all see the poll? Yeah, so answer if you're a student, a parent, a counselor, kind of which grade you're in. That helps us a little bit to frame our conversation. So yeah, it looks like a good mix of students, parents, and counselors here, and a lot of class of 2025. So a lot of people are like about to go into this process. You're starting already, maybe are making your college list and thinking about, yeah, what it's going to entail for the summer. Awesome. Great. Okay. Well, we're going to start first by hearing from our guests here about their institutions real quick so that you have a little bit of context on where they're coming from. So, Sarah, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. I'm happy to kick off. So I represent Macalester College, which is a nationally ranked, highly selective undergraduate liberal arts and sciences college with a long-standing emphasis on academic excellence, internationalism, multiculturalism, and service to society. Our goal is for our students to dive deeply into their academic interests while learning to understand different global contexts and perspectives that are different from their own. And above all, we want students to really think about how they can be a force for positive change, whether that's in their local communities, their country, or many of our students are looking to change the world. This commitment to serving society is one of the many reasons Macalester is ranked number 4 by the Princeton Review for best private schools for making an impact. Our 2,142 students, 24% of whom hold citizenships outside of the United States, represent all 50 US states, as well as 102 countries. They come to Mac to live and learn on a beautiful residential campus in the city of St. Paul, which is 15 minutes from the downtown core and 20 minutes from downtown Minneapolis, an exciting urban area that's home to 3.5 million people. Quality of teaching is highly ranked in the US at Macalester, and students choose from 64 areas of study, including biology, economics, psychology, international studies, and computer science. And I'll also note that because research is central to many of our programs, including economics, psychology, and geography, all 3 of those programs are actually designated as STEM majors, which is a big advantage for our international students. Students can also take advantage of unique multidisciplinary concentrations like community and global health, international development, and urban studies. Our students enrich their education with local internships and research opportunities at over 200 sites within 13 kilometers of our campus, which includes 15 Fortune 500 companies and even undergraduate research at the famous Mayo Clinic. With a placement rate of 95% within 6 months of graduating, graduates benefit from a global alumni network as they find success in a wide range of careers around the world. And with that, I will turn it over to my next colleague.
right. I'll quickly introduce you to Ohio Wesleyan University. Ohio Wesleyan University is a small institution. We are a university, but we have 1,500 students, and it's purely undergraduate, and the emphasis is really all about working directly with professors, having an relationship that is meant to mentor each student. And one of the unique hallmarks of Ohio Wesleyan is our curriculum that we actually have a name for. It's called the OWU Connection, because every student has multiple opportunities to connect their learning to real world experiences. So you can see in the upper left corner, every student is guaranteed internships, research, and study abroad experiences or study away experiences. And we have funding to make those opportunities a reality for every student. It's actually a requirement for students to graduate with internships and research. We have over 70 majors, from astrophysics and accounting, business and biology, to zoology. Other popular majors include politics and government, computer science, health and human kinetics, physics. We actually have our own observatory. So if you're really interested in physics and looking at the stars, you can do that at Ohio Wesleyan. We're 30 minutes from Columbus. So we're in a small college town of about 50,000 people. You can walk to downtown in 2 minutes. And if you want a taste of city life, we're just 30 minutes from Columbus, which has an international airport. And we are also known for placing students in internships and research all around the world, not just in Columbus or the Ohio area. So you will have opportunities to take that theory that you're learning in the classroom and put it into practice, starting in your very first year. And we give admission decisions in just about 3 weeks after a student applies. So we don't have one deadline, but we let students know pretty quickly after they apply. And we're very much about getting to know each student. So I'm excited to read your essays and watch your interviews. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Okay, so I feel like we're hip hopping around the US right now. Again, my name's Nicole, and I am from the University of San Francisco. And so USF, meaning San Francisco, not South Florida. A lot of times people get a little confused. They Google USF, they end up in Florida. We're definitely in California, right at the center of the city of San Francisco. So USF is this gorgeous little campus on a hill. The views are spectacular from San Francisco and from the campus. And I think for our students, one of the most essential things and the reasons they choose our campus is because of its location. San Francisco is a city that's easy to get around. And so our students can be on campus taking classes in the morning, spend the afternoon at an internship. Most of the city is accessible 10 to 20 minutes by public transit. And then be on campus for things in the evening. So I think our students really enjoy the access to a broader city that, as you can see from the slide, really allows them the opportunity for internships and putting what they're learning in the classroom, taking it beyond the classroom and into the internship setting, whether it's in one of our top marketing and entrepreneurship programs, or it's a very popular in new development, AI. So San Francisco is long been connected to Silicon Valley, but AI really is at the heart of San Francisco and really developing and changing in new and exciting ways. And so for artificial intelligence, which we'll talk a little bit more about later today, that we definitely see it being a growing opportunity for our students. But we do have 100 different programs, and our students find internships and opportunities throughout all of their programs. The other exciting thing is, because of our location, many of our classes actually go into the city as a part of the work that they're doing, whether it's learning what they're learning in the classroom, seeing it in action in a local company or one of the local nonprofits or with even the local government. So our students really can see what they're learning and see how it happens. But the other really cool piece of that is University of San Francisco is a private Jesuit institution. And so what that means is you don't have to have a religious component to your education, but it does mean that the Jesuit values will be woven into your curriculum. And the key piece of that is really just understanding education as a privilege and learning how you can take what you are doing for your work and making the world a better place. And so in every class at USF, you will be learning how you can take that data that you're working with and understand how it can make a difference depending on what you do with it or how you read it or how you understand your biases. So in every class, you're really going to learn how you can make an impact. USF does rank in the top 6% for lifetime earnings. So our graduates really are doing well and are incredibly successful. We do have housing for our students. So oftentimes in larger cities, students will ask the question, am I guaranteed housing? Definitely guaranteed for 2 years. And then most of our students are able to live on campus all 4 years. We've always been one of the most diverse campuses in the nation, either one or two. So when you come to USF, you're really going to find a place that represents all sorts of people from all over the world, but all over the US as well, and all different backgrounds. And with that, I'm just going to leave it to you to check out USF. Come visit virtually, visit in person. It's a great city. We're happy to host you and help you with your opportunity. But being on campus, if you can get there, is either virtually or in person is the best way to figure out if a school is the right fit for you. So thanks, Gloria.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into essays and writing. And so first, I wanted to ask you all, and go ahead and type in the chat, what is the purpose of the essay in an application? We want to hear like what you already think. And I know whenever I do a chat question, it takes like a minute before people are feeling comfortable, but there's no wrong answer here. So just go ahead and start typing in the chat. And I know like some of you are probably driving or doing something else at the same time. So if you're driving, don't type in the chat. But if you're in a cab, you can. You can. Okay, great. People are saying you're showcasing your values and your character. It's a way to show who you are. It's a way for admissions officers to get to know an applicant and why they're a good fit for your specific university. These are some great ideas. Anything else? Anything else? All right. Information, to have information about the applicants. Yes, information is great. And that's very broad. And so my next question is actually going to be a poll question, and I put it on a slide as well in case some people cannot see the poll, but sorry. What kinds of stories are important? What do you think you should write about? So I'm curious what people think are the best stories to write about. And we'll give it a minute for you all to take this poll. All right, so far the leading answer is something authentic and personable. Some people are saying the most exciting or unique story. We've got a few that are saying that they should be academically focused and some that are writing about goals. But if the option that you think is the best is not on here, you can type in the chat as well. I think, if you go back to what you thought the purpose was and what you think you should write about, there's probably some parallels, right? Okay, so about half of the people have taken the poll, and 62% say that it should be something authentic. Great! But I think there's not a right answer to this, right? So I'm gonna stop this poll, and I'm gonna stop sharing for a second so that people can see each other. I'm gonna ask admissions officers, what do you all think? Is there a right answer on kinds of stories or topics that are best? to write about? And maybe I'll frame it this way. What were some of the trends that you saw in this past cycle? And how were they similar or different than the previous cycles? And like all of you have a fair number of years of experience in reading applications. Anything interesting that you saw this past cycle versus cycles before, and maybe what worked and didn't work?
Well, one thing I'll say is that the essays I read this year were feeling more optimistic. As we know, we all went through that pandemic for many years. And so the last few years, essays had been very introspective, maybe filled with kind of negative or topics about anxiety or worries. And I think students are now kind of more outwardly focused and more optimistic. And I definitely love to read essays that don't showcase, a student's weaknesses or, you know, uh, anxious or sad aspects, but I want to be inspired and uplifted when reading an essay. So I loved the positivity that I saw coming back in essays.
Mm.
I was waiting to see if Sarah is gonna jump in first. Well, I'll just poke at the elephant in the room and say, we saw a lot of AI, and I think that was something that we were expecting it. We were expecting, ChatGPT to take hold, and I think that what that means is not necessarily that. There's something signed on the bottom that tells us that is ChatGPT. But what happens is some of the things that we've said this year or in this poll that were the goals, right? Is, I think for me, the most important thing is to hear a student's voice. And for me, whatever that vehicle is that you use to show us a little bit about your authentic person, it gets muted when you use AI. And so for me, it felt like with some of the essays, it felt very much like it had been whitewashed, like there was just a very generic sense to a lot of the essays. And we sort of lost, I think students think about like having the perfect essay so much, and they really want to do their best. And they realize that sometimes the little quirkiness that comes through in your writing, like that tells us something about you and tells us something like it's kind of cool. It gives you a part of your personality. And so I know Sarah has some things to share about that, and probably Kristen too. But I think that was a trend that I saw this year, that it just felt like there was a standardized component to it that I found it more difficult to understand the student or get a sense for the student because it had come through a system that sort of removed it. Sarah, what do you want to say?
I definitely want to echo everything that you both have said. In terms of the first question, I truly believe there's no such thing as a bad topic if it is handled authentically and you are infusing your own personal voice. I know sometimes there's kind of these standardized responses like, oh, please don't write about this or that because I read 500 essays each year about I made the game-winning goal or I had a season-ending injury, so don't write about it. No, my perspective is, even if it is a topic that I have read a lot of, even that same season, I mean, I've been doing this for close to 17 years at this point. It is very difficult for a student to write about something that I have never read about before. And that's okay. My job as a reader is to remember that, yes, lots of students do community service work or are involved in athletics or have had a momentous experience as part of, trying to think big or a big competition like that. But how are you writing about it? I can learn some wonderful things about how a student personally reacts to a situation that I always find really helpful. I think AI has definitely accelerated that whitewashing that Nicole was talking about, that kind of sameness. But I would say even before that, we still saw that in essays that were so highly edited that they just sounded like all personality had been stripped out of it, or the sense that I need to sound like a graduate level student in my essay in order to be impressive or to get notice. And again, at least from my perspective, we're not expecting you to write like a graduate level student. You're applying to an undergraduate program. You're high school students. Um, if you are a perfect writer already, then what do you need my college for if you've already got it all figured out? We pride ourselves in how we can help students develop their writing and their communication. So I think sometimes students get so wrapped up in having a structurally or technically perfect essay that they miss out on that authenticity and that voice, which is, as many of you are writing, is the purpose of the writing, like showing that personality, giving a voice to the application process.
Well, given that, when I asked my guests earlier when we were having a planning meeting about this, what are some of the trends? Obviously the AI came up, and I put a poll up here, and I don't know who's answering which, so I'm not judging. So be honest. Have you used ChatGPT or other generative AI in your writing? And I think like we'll probably see, I mean, even for myself, I have. And, as we were talking in our planning meeting, so has everyone on some of it. And there are some times when there's a good use case for it. Um, and right now the poll, we've got about half participating, and it's half and half. A little bit more have said yes, and others have said no. And so, and that's okay. And some of it might be availability of it for you, or just not knowing how to use it well. And for others, you're kind of leaning into it and depending on it a lot. And so as we continue this conversation about essays, we're going to have that kind of in the background as a lens of like, okay, even if you are using ChatGPT, or even if you've figured out a great way to use it, where does it detract and what can you do with it to make it better, is part of we are going to have that lens. We're not going to avoid that this exists in the world, but we are going to talk a little bit about, I mean, as Nicole and Sarah have both mentioned, like it was obvious to them when it wasn't used well. And so we do want to kind of have that in our conversation right now. So, but let's just reframe a little bit again, and kind of like, I want Nicole and others to kind of share, everybody kind of shared about what they thought essays mean and what the purpose is, but maybe you can kind of give a little bit more context in the whole review process.
Yeah. I think, for us, what we're thinking about is that holistic admissions process. And so what that means for us is not just what is on your transcript. That's very important. We are absolutely looking at how well you've done with school, but holistic for us in the admissions process means that we're actually looking at each piece that you'd submit, and each piece tells us a part of your story. And so for us, our campuses really are a very dynamic and living place. And each person who comes really has a huge impact on our campus in big and small ways. And so getting to know you beyond the classroom and beyond your academic goals and dreams, but really looking at how you fit in terms of the things you're interested in for fun, what sorts of personality or goals or values you have, and really like the recommendations sometimes help us tell that story. Your essay can help us, tell that story, but really interviews are also just a spectacular way, not to, it is of course initial view, but I will say interviews a lot of times, it's just a chance to like get to know you as a person in a human capacity, because you as a human are coming to our campus. And so we really are just trying to get that whole sense of who you are And how is our school? Sometimes it's just looking out for you. Is our school a right fit for you? Are you going to come and be happy at our school and really find it a place that fits for you and is going to help you soar and be successful? So it's not all one-sided. It's not just us thinking about ourselves, but we really want you to be happy and be successful as well. So in terms of thinking about the role of the essay versus a personal statement, so that sometimes can help you think about how you frame it. It may be less academic focused or other focused, I would say, like academic and outside your personhood, whereas the essay really for us in the US pulls in a part of your person. It really reflects your values, your goals, who you are, and your personality. So it's a little bit different if you're looking like to the UK and what their personal statements are like versus writing in the US and what we're looking for in our application. So if you're doing both applications, just knowing that those are different types of asks in terms of what we're asking you to write. And then just taking that essay to give you a chance to convey what it is that you think about things. We're going to talk a little bit about values later. It does require you to kind of just think through who you are and what's important to you, and then convey part of that in your essay. And that can come through life experiences or dreams or other parts of you that you think can kind of help tell your story and what it is in terms of your personal qualities, values, and experiences. So I think that's sort of what we're talking about is, and hopefully we'll give you an idea how to do that today in a way that feels comfortable and understanding, what it is that is beneficial for us and for you in this process.
Okay, Kristen.
All right. Well, I think a lot of times we as a society put a lot of pressure on students by using language like the essay is the only part of the application that you have total control of. And although that's true, we don't want you to come away feeling like you have to beat out the competition with your essay, or that the essay is a make or break piece of the application. It's really, as we've been saying, and we're going to continue to say, an opportunity for us to kind of get to know you as a person, because when we're looking at your grades, when we're looking at test scores, if we were just choosing students based on classes that they've taken, level of rigor and grades, that could be a really uninteresting class of students that we could put together. But when we have a chance to learn about you by finding out what's important to you, that really helps us round out our class and put together an incoming first year class of interesting people with different interests. And so the number one thing, obviously, you've got to do when you start working on your essay is picking a topic. And, as we saw in that poll, there's not one right answer to the perfect topic. But it was interesting to note that most of the students did zero in on the fact that it should be personal to them. And I would definitely agree with. And, the way that we started this Tuesday topic presentation was Gloria asking the panelists to share a fun fact. And, maybe if you start with something like that, thinking of something right off the top of your head, just kind of picking something that is meaningful to you, that could be a good way to find the right topic. Don't overthink it. Don't pick a topic that you think admission officers want to read about. The most important thing that I like to emphasize when a student is picking a topic is that you should pick a topic that is important to you. It should mean something to you, because that'll make it easier for you to kind of find that flow and get into the writing process when you're writing about something that is important to you. Next one. Don't be gimmicky. You don't want to try too hard to be funny or pick something of the moment that you think is, going to make you stand out, whether it's a current event or a hot topic like AI. One of the things I didn't mention when I was talking about essays, trends, is that the essays that stood out to me were memorable essays. And I can tell you, I would be willing to bet that all of the essays that were written with ChatGPT or AI were not memorable to me. There were just no qualities that felt unique to a student. Nothing stood out. So when I say you want to be memorable, you want to focus on using your senses. And I don't know if I've got one of those boxes here that focuses on using the senses, but use your senses, kind of focus on details. And there it is, number 5. It's really going to be those memories as you think of something that's important to you, to round out your topic with details, with memories, senses. So if you are writing about something that happened in the past, just sit for a moment and try to put yourself in that moment in time, capture how you felt, capture the details and what was going on around you, make some notes, and those might be some good qualities to put into your essay. In terms of number 3, narrow your focus. I put this on here because oftentimes students want to try and write about everything. They want to cover all of their interests, or they want to cover all of the ways that they're right for a university. Or, if they, let's say, play tennis, they want to tell me all of their great gains and wins over 14 years of life. But really the best thing is to narrow your focus, maybe focus on one particular, if we're talking about tennis, lesson learned from a match, or one game or one moment in time from a game, and really focus on those details instead of trying to be too broad with too many topics or too much focus in time. So make it personal to you. Think of it as a moment in time, focus on the details, and really try to stick to one topic, and put in lots of interesting details. And I think that's one way that ChatGPT is maybe not able to be memorable to us, is that it just lacks those personal details that are personal to you and those moments in time.
I just wanted to jump in real quick because I think as you're saying, ChatGPT doesn't give you the details. Obviously, if you are feeding the prompts to an AI generative tool, you could potentially get more details. What is your advice on that? Nicole, I know you mentioned that you had worked on something before. In ChatGPT.
I'm happy to get real personal here. So because that's what essays are, right? So my mother recently died, and when you think about writing, I was trying to write her obituary, and it's a really difficult thing. An obituary is like something we publish here. I don't know if it's global in the United States, that sort of honors that person. But it has to be really concise. And so what I did is I wrote the obituary, I put it into ChatGPT, but then what I did is I sort of read it out loud to myself and said, does this sound like me? Is this like what I say in these words? And is this how I'd phrase this? And so I sort of used it to polish up my writing, and sort of give me some ideas about how I could phrase things differently or approach the writing differently. But then I went back over it and made sure that it sounded like it was me, and that it sounded like my mom, most honestly, that it really sort of honored the topic that I was trying to convey. And so I think I am one person who does use ChatGPT. I am a fan, because I also like having new perspectives on writing, and I think it does a nice job, like sometimes switching writing. But in the end, one of the things that I often say is like just read it out loud to yourself, and if it sounds like you, great. If it doesn't, like really make sure you go back and alter it in ways that really sound like your voice and reflect what you want to say, like how you're feeling and what you want it to sound like, or they haven't, like it's a person. It the like tiny human behind the ChatGPT helping you out. It hasn't sort of shifted in a way that doesn't really reflect what you're trying to say. So yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Gloria. I'm sorry.
No, go.
Yeah. And I think going into the next slide, like the hardest thing I think sometimes for essays is like students will start with their topic. And I work with a lot of students, just like friends, kids, you know, who are like, could you help them with their essay? And they sort of start in a lot of schools, classes, when they start you working on your essay, they'll start with like, pick your topic. And I think sometimes that does students a disservice because there's work that comes before that. You know, there's things that I think we're asking you to share about yourself. Well, there's a lot of adults who can't share about themselves, honestly. And so as a teenager, having time to pause in sort of this chaotic high school, getting ready for college moment and think about in this moment, what are my values? In this moment, who am I? Those are really big questions that I think a lot of people never really pause in their life maybe to think about. And so as students, I think it can be difficult, but I think if you can take that moment before you start writing and before you pick your topic, that can really help you to choose a topic that reflects you. And so there's a couple of different things, like the values exercise that's right here. You can find it anywhere on the internet, and it's a nice exercise that just makes you think about your values and walks you to like the full exercise. Actually, there's a couple pages to it, walks you to get to like your final 3 values. But remember at the start, Gloria asked like, okay, what's your fun fact, right? So for me, my fun fact is really like, I grew up by the water. The water is essential to my being. Like it really, like I do not function well if I'm not near a large body of water. And it really, as I do this values exercise, when I was thinking about this today, like humility is really important to me. So being humble in the world and open to learning more from others and being open to different perspectives and like knowing that like my view, my place in the world is not the only. Like I think when you're near a big body of water, if you've ever been near the ocean or a large lake, you feel that humility. And then nature is super important to me, and the idea of like interconnectivity, right? And so being water, like there's people all around the water and it connects me to people through just that joint flow of what water is. And so if you can think of, like Kristen said, some fun facts about yourself, make a list of those, and then go through your values. And once you get to those, putting those things together along with some other things Kristen said, like, you know, your memories, and then you can pick an essay topic that maybe weaves those things together. Or if you've already written your essay, I had a young woman who was writing about her dog. Dogs are important to her, right? And the importance of her dogs. And I said, okay, well, that's awesome. Now let's just think about what values you're trying to convey, and are they conveyed in this essay? Or are there things that you can share, like focus on in each of your paragraphs, in each of your areas of your essay that really highlight those values that really then bring it back to you and make sure that you're sort of checking in with yourself. And so I think doing these things first can really help you to like prepare you to write an authentic essay, which I think is like the pre-work to picking your topic. So
Yeah. And thank you for bringing us to this particular topic. I think when we ask what's the purpose of the essay, like, you know, people are like showing your values and character. That was the first one that came out, right? And so I think if you have kind of that purpose behind it, okay, I want to show my values. It's not so much because like all of you do so many wonderful things. I am sure there's like plenty you could be writing about, but really kind of if you start with, okay, what are the core values of me? Like what's most important about me? and how is it being shown in the rest of the application? Like it is a whole story, right? It is a whole story. And so if you're saying you're seeing some of your values coming out through the other things that you've produced, like you're really, you care about academics, you care about excellence, that's being shown, in your transcript and your, what kind of classes you chose and things like that. It is kind of some of these other things that maybe don't, I mean, you could continue to talk about your excellence if you, or your value of excellence, if that's not coming out in your extracurricular activities as well. But kind of asking yourself the question, and I like to say, like, ask other people too, because I know growing up in a culture where you're not asked all the time, you're kind of, if you've grown up in a culture where you're just kind of doing, which you might not have been asked. And sometimes you asking someone else, like, what do you see in me, helps you realize, like, oh, that is something that's important to me. Like, I didn't notice that that was something important to me, but that's how I kind of operate. It's really nice to have a conversation with someone to help you kind of with this brainstorming exercise. And then once you've figured out, like, Nicole was like very clear, these are some of my core values. Then you can kind of go back and like, is there a story? Is there an experience? Is there something in my life that illustrates this in a way that's really compelling? And then you can go back to like what Kristen was sharing, like, okay, now we have to show and not tell that. We have to like help an admission officer like kind of experience that with me as opposed to just telling fact by fact about me. So this is all kind of interwoven together, and I think it's like a kind of a back and forth as you're writing. And so there was a question here, like, what if you have an idea which is unique to you, but you want to use AI to make it more expressive? I think that is a good use of AI, of being like, I have this great idea. Here's the skeleton of it. Here's kind of the experience, the facts behind it, whatever. But I need a few more words that help me show it better. I need a few more words that maybe an idea, but then you have to kind of, again, go back and read it. Does it sound like me? Or is it just like an encyclopedia of words that, that anybody could have written in any place? So,
Can I jump in quickly?
yeah.
But I do think there's a big difference between just giving AI an idea and having AI do the work of putting all the words together to write an essay versus Nicole, who wrote it all. And she put in things that were unique to her mother and accomplishments of her mother and things that were very specific and meaningful to Nicole and her family and her mom. So Nicole did all the work of writing it, but just used AI as like the finishing touch. So I think there's a big difference between that. And the question makes me feel like it's not just putting the finishing touch on it, but the question in the chat is more, can AI, do more of the heavy lift of writing it?
Well, I'm going to let Sarah talk a little bit about supplements, because that is actually where everybody I've talked to in the admissions world, when I say, where do you feel like you see AI the most? And they're telling me that it's actually in the supplements. And part of this is probably because of time. And this is why I'm so glad that so many juniors are on this call right now, because that means that you're thinking about it and you're giving yourself time. But a lot of people spend much of their time working on that Common App essay, or that like main big 650 word essay that they want to do. And then when it comes time to the supplements, which many of you are asking for, all of a sudden it's like, oh, time crunch, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. And so now I'm going to use ChatGPT to help me. So we're going to talk a little bit about why supplements are important and how to kind of think about that as well.
Yep, absolutely. And again, to echo, at least in my experience this past year, Macalester's supplements were really where we saw the heavy hand of ChatGPT and AI. And I think to your point, yeah, for many students, it was probably a time-saving tool. And I think that's also then comes back to kind of a broader important point, which is when you're building your list, it's important to be intentional and not just apply to 30 schools, 25 schools, because you're just trying to aim for the top 20 and you're just applying everywhere and anywhere without being thoughtful of it beyond a brand name. If you are applying to that many schools, that is a lot of time, especially around those supplements. And if you're not giving yourself time to really put as much thought and experience into answering those supplemental questions, you're really doing a disservice to your application. So let's start with who, right? Not all universities in the US are going to have a supplemental writing requirement, but many do, especially smaller schools or schools that are selective or maybe highly selective. But also keep in mind that some schools may have required supplements that you have to write no matter what to complete your application. But many schools may also just give you optional supplements. So you could have a complete application without writing a supplemental essay for a school. But let's think about why. Why are schools giving you this opportunity? It is an opportunity to reveal more about yourself, yes, but it's also a way to think about speaking more directly to an individual school, right? The personal statement, think of that as very personal on you, the writer, the student, but your audience is very general, right? Every school that has that as part of the common application or coalition application is going to read that same piece of writing. So you don't want to make it super specific to one individual school. You want it to be hyper specific to you, and then something that is readable to all of eyes that could be reading it. Supplements, however, that is your opportunity to speak one-on-one essentially to a school that you are applying to. And it can also give you a clue as to what are things that this school values? What are things that they want to highlight? Because often the topic of the question is tied deeply to either mission or a quality or values of that institution. And that's why they ask it. I can tell you from experience, many schools spend weeks, if not months, tinkering with their supplemental questions because we know that it is conveying something about ourselves as much as your answers convey something about you. So we have some essay examples. These were pulled from previous years, so please do not think that these are exactly what are the questions for these institutions for this upcoming cycle. As with everything, you need to check individually with schools on their websites to know what the most recent information is. But these are just giving you some examples, right? So you have University of Chicago. They are kind of infamous for asking very quirky, thought-provoking questions, often crowdsourced from their students. And so this one is a great example of that. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? And they are attributing that quote to Eleanor Roosevelt. And so they're asking, what is a famous quote that you like, and how would you misattribute it to someone else? And to really think about the implications of doing that. So what is University of Chicago trying to communicate with this question? They're communicating that they value out-of-the-box thinkers, creative thinkers, kind of a sense of fun with it. And so if you are someone who really enjoys that type of thought exercise, or that's like a really exciting prompt for you, then that can be a good added validation that, yeah, you might be a good fit with University of Chicago. If you look at that question and you're like, what on earth is this? This is silly. This makes no sense to me. Well, then ask yourself, well, if this is something that the school values and you don't really like, is it still a school that is going to be a really good fit for you? You might have other schools like University of Notre Dame that asks more specifically about values. They're asking, what kind of impact do you want to make with your education, and who do you want to serve after you graduate? University of Notre Dame famously is a more religiously aligned institution, although you do not have to be religious to go to Notre Dame. But values of service and helping others is kind of core to their identity. And so this question again is kind of giving you a sense of, oh, this is something the school values. Do I value this? Is this the question I'm excited to write about? Who am I hoping to help after I graduate? And again, if you're looking at that, you're like, I don't really want to serve, like, that's not my focus. That's not what I'm really interested in. Then it's kind of a check of, okay, is this really a best fit school for me, or are there other things about the university that fit? But again, schools are speaking to you even through the questions that they're asking. And then you have many schools that, like Barnard College, might be asking you that, why are you applying? Why us? Why might be a good match for you? I know it is really tempting because many schools, especially small liberal arts colleges, might ask a version of this question. And on paper, they look very similar, similar sizes, similar types of academics. And so often I find students kind of create these, I call them plug and chug essays, where a lot of the generalities are there. Oh, I'm really interested in the small class sizes and getting to know my professor and the beautiful campus with lots of trees and beautiful buildings. And I love the psychology department. And the only things that they are changing are probably locations. So let's say for Barnard, they're mentioning the wonderfulness of being in New York City, whereas for Macalester, they're talking about the wonderfulness of being in the Twin Cities. And then they will have pulled out one or two specific course titles from a quick search of a website, and they're just swapping out a professor's name, but all the rest is the same. And yes, that will save you a lot of time, but it is, again, a missed opportunity because it's very obvious to us when a student has kind of written a general template and they're just plugging in certain, like 3 different variables in that. So even something that sounds very simple, like why us? Why are you applying to our institution? Still requires time and thoughts of values. And what are your values? How is this connecting to the values of the institution? And really applying some of those same brainstorming techniques that we were talking about with the personal essay to your supplements. Because at the end of the day, these can be really helpful and help us also get a sense of a student's interest level, right? If you've taken the time to really be thoughtful and write a bespoke response to a supplemental essay, odds are that's a student who actually has taken the time to get to know a school and are very serious about that application. If they are just quickly using AI or a plug and chug template or shoehorning something they've already written for a school they really want to go to and like, it's close enough to this other school that's further down on my list, that speaks to us too. It says, well, maybe it's not a deal breaker, but it's a missed opportunity. Maybe this student doesn't know us as well as this other student who did take that time to really invest and write a very personal response to a supplement. The other thing I'll just highlight is to be mindful of. Many schools will have their supplements right on the common application or coalition application itself, but there are some schools that may put that supplement option in your portal after you've submitted an application. So it is very important. It's always important to log into your applicant portals and make sure you're staying on top of things, but you want to make sure that you're not missing out on opportunities, whether that's an optional supplement or a school that highly values an interview or an initial view that might be there in the portal. So you want to make sure you're looking at all areas and staying on top of things because you might miss out on an opportunity.
Amazing. And I can't believe like the hour already went by. So, I'm really, really grateful to my colleagues for joining early in the morning to kind of share their insights. I think one takeaway here is you do want to spend time understanding the schools that you're applying to. And I think there's this tendency, and because of the Common App or the coalition, it's just easier for us to kind of throw a lot of applications in. But your writing is going to, like, none of these people here are English teachers. They're not reading your writing as an English teacher would. Like they're actually reading your writing to try to figure out who you are. At the end of the day, they're trying to figure out who you are and whether or not you're going to do well and thrive on their campuses, whether or not your values kind of like are consistent with their values, things like that. And so if you don't know the colleges, whatever you write may not jive. And you yourself, if you're writing, especially if it's one of those ones that comes in the portal, you need to know the school because you're not going to have tons of time at that point to do the research. I mean, you can, but I think if you've done the research ahead of time, then your whole thread line is going to be much more compelling. And so, I'm so glad you guys are here thinking about this now and taking time to reflect because a lot of this is not so much the writing itself, but it is actually that whole understanding of who you are piece that's going to be more important and who you are in relation to the schools that you're applying to. If you want to know more about these schools, you can reach out to them. They all have wonderful search sessions of their own, as well as loads of information on their website. And yeah, I'm going to let them go because it's past the hour. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes if people have questions about reflection, because that's what Initial View is all about, trying to understand who you are. So if you have questions about Initial View itself, feel free to stay on. But Nicole and Sarah and Kristen, thank you so much for joining me. And it was really a pleasure for you to be here. So have a great morning, day, afternoon, wherever you are. And for those of you who want to stay on, I'm here.
Thanks, Gloria. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
I do have another 10 minutes.
Oh,
I can
okay.
hang around as well, just in case.
Yeah. If anyone has questions for Sarah too, you're welcome to stay. I'm here to answer any questions. I know some people come to these Tuesday talks and have never heard of Initial View, just are here for for the topic at hand. And but if you are um and some of you know who we are. So if you know who we are and you don't need to know anything else, you can go. If you're like, I also have 10 more minutes or 15 more minutes, feel free to stay. Real quickly, for those of you who don't know, Initial View is a platform that allows students to interview. It is meant to be more like the Common App essay versus a individual school interview. But again, getting at the heart of who you are, giving more opportunities for context. It is a back and forth. There's a real person asking you questions. That's recorded. There's also a writing sample, which is another way for colleges to then again see your writing and also hopefully another character trait, another value of yours. So it's a great opportunity for you to add to your application and give admissions officers like Sarah a little bit more context and a little bit more of a way to imagine you on campus. And so, yes, that's what we do. So let's talk about how to make essays and interviews more interesting, more captivating. Sarah made a good comment earlier where she said, there's not really something I read that is unique anymore because the stories, I mean, there's only so much 17-year-olds can do. But what holds you into it? Maybe that's a good way to put it. Sarah, what holds you into keeps you wanting to read?
I think it starts with the setup in the first paragraph. And by that, I don't mean you have to have the most perfect, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, iconic first sentence. For some students, if you're really into creative writing and that's your jam, then absolutely, we can have some fun with it. But if that's not you, so if I'm reading an application of a student whose application is very focused on sciences and STEM, and they're a very logical person, I'm not expecting a very creative literary writing style or first paragraph. But I think that first paragraph, it's a setup, right? So you can introduce the the event or the relationship that you are going to be exploring. But I think initially what I'm really trying to get a sense of, is there an authentic voice here? Or is this already demonstrating that this has been so overly polished that there's no heart in it? It's just kind of like, yeah, I'll still read it because I might pick up some facts, but it might be more of a skim because I can already get a sense of there's not really a heart or an emotion there. And unfortunately, there's no guaranteed way to do that. I think starting with the exercise we were talking about, especially like the values, and really having a strong sense of what are the values you're trying to convey in your essay, that will help, rather than starting from, okay, this is an event and a plot that I want to describe. I think what keeps me reading an essay is how quickly a student can kind of get into meat and potatoes of it, which is, what are the learned experiences? What are the reflections? And almost that inciting incident, or kind of what was set up in the paragraph, becomes like the background. Like that's how you got into all this reflective piece, but it's not 3/4 of it. I think a pitfall I often find with students that kind of cause me to zone out a little bit is when I'm just getting plot, and then this happened and this happened and then this, and there might be some exciting adjectives, but again, it's really focused on what a student is doing or what happened for like 3/4 of the essay, and then all of a sudden at the last paragraph, that's when students are talking about a change of emotion, or a thought, or something that's challenged a previously held belief, but they haven't left themselves room to really expound on that. And so I get like maybe 2 tantalizing sentences and I'm like, that was the essay. So to make it captivating, you don't want to spend so much time on the plot that you're missing the reflection and the analysis. And I'll be fair, it's the hard work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Plot is easy. Deep reflection and personalizing that way, that's the hard part, which is a great reason for starting now.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's one more question here about essays, and then Sarah, I'll let you go. Is somebody saying, is it okay to write anything that's not related to the applied major? But yeah, that's what it says. And I think, for Macalester, that's probably different, like, than some schools that where you're applying to a very specific college and major, but maybe you can address it a little bit.
Yes. Always look at the prompt and what's being asked, but for small liberal arts colleges, and I've worked at a few over the course of my career, in general, you don't have to, right? We're going to get a sense of your academic interest in things through activities and the classes that you're choosing to take on your transcripts. And often students, when they ask a teacher to write a letter of recommendation, it's a teacher from their favorite subject. So we're going to get a sense of that. And often those supplemental questions, again, there could be opportunities there to talk about a really interesting bit of research or a thing that you did. But for the personal statement, think of it as an opportunity to tell us about the other stuff, right? Because at least at a school like mine, yes, classes are very important, but the majority of your time at Macalester is going to be spent outside of the classroom. It's going to be spent in residence halls, interacting in clubs and organizations, volunteering, going out into the Twin Cities, sports, whatever it is. And so what kind of roommate could this student be? What kind of community member is this student going to be? The personal essay, it tends to be where we find a lot of that information. That said, and this is just, again, there's no hard and fast rules with this. If your academic interest, if your research, whatever that is truly something that's the most important thing to you, and your values are deeply tied to that, then absolutely write about that. If that's what you want to write about. I think sometimes students get so concerned about writing about what they think we want to read. They they forget that you're the ones dictating what you want us to read. And you can't control if a school resonates with that or not. If they don't resonate with it and it's something that's very personal to you, that's probably a good indication that's not a good school for you. So try not to worry so much about pleasing the college as pleasing yourself when you're writing that personal statement. If that's academics, fantastic. If it's something else, go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all. I will now leave you with Gloria, but thanks
Bye,
everybody.
Sarah.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye. Awesome. Well, thank you for all of you who are continuing to stay. I know there's some questions about initial view. If somebody's asking if it is a optional element or if any schools are requiring. No schools are requiring. It's definitely an option. And I like to say optional equals opportunity. It's an opportunity. And I think like some of the questions that I'm seeing on this are a lot about kind of, what can I tell you? How many qualities can I include, or how many qualities should I include in the essay? And I just want to say that the essay is 650 words. That's the Common App essay. And not all colleges have supplements. Many more are having them, but those supplements, 1, 2, or 3 of them are like 200 words each. So, you kind of, I want you all to kind of remember that the application, even though it shows up in a format, like the Common App has like, okay, section 1, section 2, section 3, like, even though it comes in a format, the admission officer actually is trying to get a full story. So when you think about the full story and whether or not you should do initial view, I like to think of initial view as the way to tie all that together in a story. And whatever you weren't able to get in very well through the essay or through the supplement, you have another space to then actually talk about all those things. There is a question about like, should my essay be related to my applied major? I would say most of the time, no. I don't actually think you need to write about your academic interests or your major in your essay, because you have your academics in your transcript, and you have your academics in your test scores, and you have your academics in the number of AP classes you've taken, or which IB classes you're taking. And but in the interview, actually, there is room for you to kind of dive a little deeper if there is a specific academic interest in there that maybe your school doesn't have, doesn't offer a class for you that's related to your major. Well, you might be able to fit that in somewhere in your application, but the interview is a great chance to talk about that and to explain, my school doesn't have this, but I got interested in this because my dad or my friend is doing this type of research or work or whatever, and they got me involved, and now I love it and I can't wait to study in college. That's a great space to be doing it. Now, just for the nuts and bolts, because some people are like, wow, I've never heard of this. It does cost money. It is a $245 cost. That's an interview with a real person and a writing sample, which is 20 minutes. It is an open-ended prompt. I like to give the example, like if you get into a taxi and you find $10,000, what do you do with it? So opportunity for you to show a little bit of your creativity, your character, but also just kind of like how you write. And this package is an all-you-can-send package. So it costs the same amount of money if you just do it for practice, or if you're doing it and you're sending it to one school, or you're doing it and sending it to 10 schools, same price. And so it is not meant to be school specific. We will not ask you any questions about a college. We like to ask you about your academic interests, but we won't we don't want you to necessarily feel like you need to say that you want to major in something, knowing that you might be applying to one college for a certain major and another college for another major. So it's not a school specific thing. The nice thing about that conversation, that back and forth, is that a college will be able to hear your values and will be able to see that they fit with their values. So that's the beauty of doing one interview for all, and then you can be done with it and be excited. We don't have a set list of questions. So I know some of you are thinking, how do we prepare? There's not a set group of questions because our interviewers are actually given goals instead of questions. So the goals are to help an admission officer understand your academic chops. It's one thing to say that you got straight A's, but they want to give you room to maybe talk about something that an academic interest that you really love, or you worked really hard on, or you grew a lot in. If you want to explain, maybe like, I was getting B's and now I'm getting A's in this class, like this is a great opportunity. So we will touch on academics. Another goal is to touch on what you do outside of your classroom. And somebody is asking, are extracurricular activities really important? It's not so much the activity itself that's important. It is actually what character you're learning from them, and also like how you're able to manage your life. Like if you're getting straight A's, but you don't do anything out of the classroom, that says one thing. But if you're getting straight A's and you do multiple activities outside of the classroom, that also like says something about your academic side. But more importantly, on the extracurricular, I think colleges want to see impact. So, and it doesn't have to be big impact. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I started an NGO and like thousands of people, were helped. That's not necessarily impact. Impact could be, I really love reading and we didn't have a book club at our school, but I was able to start a book club and we grew from 1 to 10 people. Like that's also impact. They just want to see like, what are you doing to kind of, contribute to your community, no matter how small or big that community is. Like, what have you done to kind of contribute to that? So it's, again, not so much like, oh, I'm in Model UN. That's not so much. Lots of people are in Model UN, but what you did during Model UN, how you grew, how you learned, this is all important. 150 characters is not a lot in the essay section to write that, which is why one of my interviewers' goals is to allow you space and time to talk about something that you've done outside of the classroom. Another goal is, I tell my interviewers, I'm like, you need to help admissions officers understand their character and their values. So some kind of characteristics. So give them an opportunity to share a story about what's important to them. And then our last question for every interview is always, is there anything else you want to share? So your student, if you're a student, or if you're a counselor or a parent, like what you're trying to encourage your student is like, have a conversation. That's more important than trying to like make sure that everything is said. Have a conversation. And at the very end, they're always going to ask you, is there anything else to share? So if you didn't get a chance to talk to about something important those first 10, 12 minutes, you will have a chance at the end to be able to highlight that. At the end of the day, I think we all get to know each other better when we have a conversation, and it's almost not what we're saying. Sometimes it's how we're saying it that actually makes the impact. So don't worry so much about the actual answers that need to come out of your mouth, like in terms of facts, but really kind of more about how you engage, how you kind of go back and forth. Do you understand what they're asking? Do you know how to like even have that self-reflection moment in the moment? It's completely fine if an interviewer asks you a question and you say, can I think about that for a second? That's great. That shows that you're being thoughtful and that you're not just memorizing a bunch of things, that you're actually trying to think about what is authentic to you. If the way that our interview works is colleges don't know that you're doing the interview when you're doing it. So if you finish it, we will show it to you. So you will have an account, you'll log in, you'll be able to watch the whole thing. If you are not happy with it, you don't have to send it. And if you're not happy with it, you can book another interview. Our rule is that you cannot book it the day after. Like you have to book, you have to wait 2 weeks in between. And I like to tell people the 2 weeks in between are for you to kind of also calm down, because you will be your worst critic. Whenever I record these sessions and I watch them back, I think, oh, I sound so weird, and why did I stumble? And you're going to be your worst critic. So it gives you time to kind of like settle down, maybe have a counselor, a teacher, a parent, somebody who you trust, a good friend, watch it with you. And if you feel like it sounds like you, it's there's then you should send it. I think you should send it. I think it really helps more often than not. But if you're not happy with it, you don't have to send it, and you can book again. You have to wait 2 weeks. You have to pay again. And you cannot pick and choose between the two. So if you are going to choose to do it again, it's an intentional choice. You can't do it and then be like, oh, actually, I like my first one better. Can I use that one? We don't allow for that. And most of that is because we don't want you to kind of try to super score your interview. Your last interview is going to be the one that's most authentic to you. Once you are happy with it, then you in your portal will be able to send to colleges through our platform. We have this great integration with colleges. So the interview will go through our API feed to them. They will be able to match the interview with your application, and then it will be sitting right inside your file. That's the beauty of this interview versus like an alumni or admissions interview. An alumni and admissions interview, sometimes they might also be online, but it is one person and they usually write a report. That report is put inside your file, and so the admissions officers don't always get to hear your actual voice. With Initial View, they will hear, they will have access to it. Every reader has access to it. So a lot of times in the application process, you'll have a first read and then hopefully a second read. Some colleges have paired reading, so they have two people in your file at the same time. And we've been told that when that happens, one will be kind of recalculating your GPA and kind of looking at your transcript, and the other one will be reading an essay and listening to an interview. And so the nice thing is you get to sit in the room with the admissions officer when you submit your Initial View interview. There are very few colleges who do not accept this. And I will just say that in my more than a decade of doing this, there are schools who say they don't look at interviews or consider interviews, but I will hear later that they actually watched it. So I'm not saying that colleges are trying to be tricky. I think that colleges are complicated and leadership is complicated, and like access is a big question for many places. So they might not broadly say on their website that they need this interview or information, but data is data, and all colleges want data. And how they're tracking that data, how they're looking at that data, it varies between school and school. So I like to tell people, instead of worrying about whether or not they accept the interview, worry about what do you have to say. And if you have something important to say, work on how you say that. This is a skill that's going to be helpful for you, not just for college, but also for internship and also for your whole life. You're going to be doing a form of interview for your whole life. And so, one, the skill itself is really important. Two, do you have something important to say? And especially like with the limitation of the application itself, you probably have more to say. And if you've said it compellingly, then why not send it? Worst case scenario is that they don't click on it. Best case scenario is that you added something important and that pushed you over the edge. I recently was with a group of admissions officers, and we were doing a little simulation experiment, and we were watching them kind of interact with applicant data. It was fake applicant data. We were doing kind of a simulation, but we told them, okay, this is a university that has this kind of specific goal, and we want you to build a class. And it was so interesting to me to watch how quickly a student could be in admit bin and then out of the admit bin, like just back and forth and back and forth because of a lot of things that are actually out of your control. What you do have in your control is how much you share with an admissions office and how authentic you are in that process. And whether or not that comes into play for you it's very hard to know. You're not going to know. Every year a college has a different goal from their president and different different things. Like if a school suddenly gets a lot of funding for a specific department, they may be looking for a specific kind of student. You don't have control over that, but you do have control of making sure that colleges know everything that they need to know about you, so that if you are a bubble case, that you're going to be edged in because of some interesting information that you revealed. Somebody's asking about consistency with what you say in your interview and with the rest of your application. Again, it is a story. So if you are in your transcript, you're a very STEMmy math and science person, and your extracurriculars and your awards are all kind of physics Olympiad, and you're in the robotics club, and it's very STEMmy. And in your interview, you only talk about your love for art and psychology. It might feel a little bit like, oh, where's the story? I'm a little bit confused. That's not to say there are plenty of people, like we had an interviewee who was very math and science focused, but she also was amazing at photography. And she talked about photography in her interview and nowhere else in her application. Not nowhere else. She had a line in her extracurricular about photography, but pretty far down. You have 10 activities. It was kind of one of the last activities. But it was great to hear that side of her. The thing is, she didn't only talk about photography. If she only talked about photography, I think that it could have been like, what's happening? Is this the same student? So I think you don't need to repeat everything that's on your application, but you also don't want to be completely out of left field and not related to the rest of your application. Think about it as a whole thread. And yeah, I think the interview gives you a space to go into some of the things a little deeper, right? If you only have 10 activities, some of you are doing more than 10 activities. If you only have 150 characters, you might want to talk about a story or an experience that gives a little bit more color to that. I hope that answered that question, Mike. All right, well, let's see. I think my team might have some other questions here. The interview is also like somebody's asking, like, okay, my grades are a certain way and they're not perfect. What can we do in the application? In the Common App, there's always an additional information section. And that might be a place where you can explain something, especially like for those, I know we're coming out of COVID, but there's still a little bit of COVID ramifications on students, depending on what part of the world you're from. And so, if you want to use that additional information section, don't write a huge long essay in it, but you just can tell a few facts that might be helpful for them to know. For example, my son just went through the process and he didn't have access to a certain class. And so he wrote that in his additional information. I would say that the interview is a great place for you to explain a few things. Like if you're like, I have a learning disability. The interview is a great chance to kind of talk about that. And in fact, you being able to share about that in an interview could be very compelling to an application reader when they think, oh, wow, they've gone through a lot of challenges and yet they still are brave enough to come to do this interview and they have shown growth, like maybe in 9th grade you had worse grades and by 11th grade they're all up. Like that's great. That even though your GPA may not be a 4.0, if you're able to explain kind of that growth, that's a great way, to use that interview opportunity. So that is something to consider for some of you who are concerned about that. Let's see what else here. Okay. Most of the, I think people are still kind of which schools, and I just want to say, most of the schools, not most, all of the schools who participate in Tuesday Talks are looking at the interviews. So at a minimum, you can go to my Tuesday Talks site and see like, wow, okay, there's a large group of schools that use initial view in some manner. But I think like if you're applying to a selective college in the US, it is worth spending the time thinking about preparing for it. For those of you who are like, how young should we start? I would say you can start practicing when you're in 9th and 10th grade in terms of just having someone ask you some questions like, what do you love studying? What makes you excited when you wake up in the morning? What is the last thing you're thinking about when you go to bed? What do you like to do outside of the classroom? Like at the end of the day, colleges in the US, they really care about what you like to do outside of the classroom. I mean, because learning, we live in a digital age. We now can learn anything we want to learn online. So if you are wanting to learn about a specific subject, or you're wanting to learn even how to code, these are all things that you can do on your own without going to college. The reason for college is that interaction, right? That engagement, that being able to be spurred on by your professors, by your classmates, that kind of thing. And so because of that, colleges in the US are really hoping that when you get there, you're going to be someone who's engaging, someone who is going to ask a question, someone who is going to be a good roommate, someone who is going to participate in a club. The learning is great too. Their professors really want to teach you, but they also know like the reason why you're coming here is for a community. And so because of that, you should ask yourself right now, what do I do? What do I like to do outside of the classroom? And so 9th and 10th grade is a great time to be exploring that. I tell this story all the time. I played a lot of piano when I was little. I was a competitive pianist. That was a lot of my competitions and everything in high school were related to piano. But I remember my junior year sitting in a competition with one of my rivals, and we had time before we were supposed to play. So I started a conversation with her, and I asked her what she did outside of piano. And it was super interesting to me. She said, well, I don't really have a lot of time because I practice 7 hours a day. And I remember thinking, I don't practice 7 hours a day, nor do I want to practice 7 hours a day. I like piano, but I don't like it that much. And that was a great realization for me because I realized like, oh, there's a whole other side of me outside of this thing that I've been trying really, really hard at for a really long time. Maybe it's okay for me to pivot and explore some other interests because I'm not that. I don't want to be that passionate about this particular thing. And it's okay to let go of that. And so as a 9th and 10th grader, if you've been doing the same thing for many, many years and you're like, I don't love it. I'm not good at it. It's okay to like try something new. And now is a great time to be trying something new. If you're in 11th grade and you're the summer of 11th grade, you have kind of done some things. You still have a summer to explore, but now is a great time for you to be thinking about, okay, what have I spent most of my time doing? And do I have the vocabulary to share about that? I've interviewed people who love video games, but then when I asked them to kind of explain like why a video game was important to them or what was fun about it or like explain it, they kind of fell just because nobody had asked them those questions before. They're like, well, I like it, but I've never actually explained how this game works. And so those are things that you need to start developing vocabulary for. The biggest way, though, to prepare for junior is to find someone to talk to. and make sure that that person is asking you follow-up questions. The first tier of question is always easy. You can Google, Baidu, go on Reddit, like ask all the, like, what are important interview questions that I should know? And you'll get a whole long list, right? But the real thing is, what's going to be the follow-up question? If I say, what's your favorite subject? And you say math, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. We're not going to just leave it there, right? So, but what could my follow-up questions be? It could be, well, why do you like math? That's a normal, very predictable follow-up question. But the interviewer could go in all sorts of directions. They could say, oh, well, tell me what kind of math you're studying right now. Have you recently solved a problem that was really challenging? You know, it could be like, what kind of math do you think you want to study in the future? How does math like fit into your everyday life? Like, there's a lot of ways that that subject could kind of go. And your job right now is to figure out how much can I drill down? If I cannot drill down very far, I either have to ask myself, can I drill down further? Like, let me practice drilling down further. Or the other is like, maybe I'm not that interested in this topic and I shouldn't bring it up in the first place. Like, my classic example is always, I asked a girl one time what she did over the summer and what she was most proud of. And she said, I did an internship at Citibank. What do you think my follow-up question was? Yeah, what did you do? Like, what did you learn? I did ask specifically, I said, oh, what were some of your job like requirements, or what were some of the expectations for you in the internship? And for most high school students doing an internship, there's actually not a lot of responsibilities. And I didn't mean to put her in a bad spot. As soon as I asked that question and I saw her face, I remember thinking, oh, no, no, it's okay, it's okay. Because she basically didn't have much to say. She was a high school intern, and that meant making copies and making coffee and things like that. And she didn't really have a good answer. And I just felt so bad. And I thought, oh no, like, if you always need to be prepared that there's going to be a follow-up question. And if you don't have anything to say about it, it's not worth bringing up in the conversation. So if you are a junior and you don't have somebody to practice with, we do have a product called Junior Interview that you could sign up for. It is the whole experience, but you don't send it anywhere, but you get a chance to practice and see what it feels like, including the writing sample. And then we actually have a former admissions officer record like a 3-minute-ish video back to you to give you some feedback. You know, they'll tell you like what worked and what didn't work, and maybe, you know, what to think about before you do your real interview. So if that's something helpful to you, you can just look on our website, initialview.com. And when you look reserve interview, there's something called Junior Interview, and you can reserve that. Great. I think we're going to end that here unless there's a lot of questions. So we will have another Tuesday talk next week. It is going to be with, let me see if I can remember them right. Dartmouth, Duke, Georgetown, and Northwestern and Vanderbilt. So 5 really great selective, highly selective universities are going to be on a Tuesday talk with us next week, same time. And that's going to be an Ask Us Anything. So if you have questions that I didn't answer about the whole application process, it will be a great time to ask them next week. And then I will hang on next week as well for more Initial View tips and questions. So feel free to tune in next Tuesday if you have time. And if you don't have time and you still have questions, please follow us on WeChat, Instagram, and you can always reach us at contact@initialview.com. Maybe I'll type that in the chat here. Contact@initialview.com. And we're happy to kind of help answer other questions. If you are from a school that says, I really want all of my students to hear this, we do info sessions for schools too. So if you are like, my school needs to hear this, email us and we'll make sure we can schedule an info session for your students and families. Thank you once again for spending so much time with us this morning, afternoon, evening. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all. I know the college application process can be really stressful, but hopefully you're learning a lot about yourself as well in that process. And there will be a great school for you. We don't know which one it is yet, but there will be a great school for you. All right. Have a great evening, morning, afternoon. Take care. Bye. Oh, for those of you who want a recording, we will have recordings on the actual Tuesday Talks page or our YouTube link.